Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm making sure that we have everyone here. It's a quick head count for myself, but I will send you all the agenda and the updated 6-month report if you guys would like to have. All right, 1 second. We've got 21 people, from the commission. There are two people who said that they'd be coming in a little bit later. So just guess, I don't want you guys to have to wait. So if you want, we can get started with,
There was never any.
some subcommittee updates, and then we can go up. Oh, David, great, amazing.
It's,
It's so fun work.
it's,
First,
almost
so we
it's
just-
all.
we just check.
We're still gonna put this in for- It's gonna be checked, it's gone, but at least. The. Those. Stoppage, with their sassy. It's.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we have 22. I'm sorry, I've been counting this whole time. It's kind of hard. I might be wrong. We might have the amount we need. Let me just.
We did what we could. In our frameworks.
Oh, there we go. Now we have 23. Amazing. That makes me feel so much better. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. It's been 3 months since we last got together and we didn't have a quorum then, so I'm very excited that we have a quorum now. So we have a couple of things that we have to get through in terms of order of business. We're gonna do the chair vote that we weren't able to do last time in April. So the two people who are who have volunteered their time are Amanda Zettel, Charlestown Preservation Society, and Jean-Luc Barrique from NICOB, the North American Indian Center of Boston. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today because his flight was changed, and so he's flying now instead of when he was supposed to be. But nonetheless, we're gonna put that through a vote. And then I don't know if you guys got a chance to look at the meeting minutes. It's okay if not, but we're supposed to approve that. It's okay if not, and then we'll do some subcommittee updates. And then, yeah, it says any plans that need approval, we'll vote for a vote, but I'm not sure if we're there yet. So I'm gonna launch the poll. If you are not on the commission, you can, I think there's an abstain section, so choose that, but make sure to choose both of them when you vote.
Yeah. It's gross. And it's, the guy that was. The guys. The neighbors, they were ready to sue us. So we were doing.
Okay.
Yeah, but they were telling me.
We're still missing a couple.
This project, and they're like, hell no, we don't want to live in a fire. And. Yeah. And basically, the guys trying to sue him.
We're missing, I think we're missing like 3.
NAC, are you able to mute the person who is having a meeting in their office?
I think that's me, but yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
It's Hennessy, it's Nick.
it is so Nick. Nick is very loud. He's like 4 desks over and you can still hear him. I can mute myself. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, guys. Okay, 100% answered. Great. And the whole, here are the results. So, see that? It's great. It's unanimous. Okay, so that's good. So, I guess like I have an echo. Do I have an echo? Okay, perfect. All right, so thank you guys for voting. That means Amanda and Jean-Luc are the co-chairs for the commission. Amanda's, so we're gonna go from there to meeting minutes. Oh, you know what it is. I think I'm on loud. Somebody over there is listening to me. That's why I can hear myself. Anyway, I know I sent it last minute, so I'm not sure if you guys were able to review it long enough to approve it. So up to you guys if you are okay with approving the meeting minutes. What do you guys think?
What problem?
Yeah, okay, I'll put meeting, I'll send another form.
Yeah, everything on the tree regulated by us. If you have a permit that is issued before July 3rd, just so that. Anything after July 3rd. Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Roll it out, so, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it won't let me launch it. So never mind. Okay, can you guys just give me a react thumbs up
Yeah, you can do whatever you
so I
want.
can see?
Do you want a motion to approve the minutes with that?
Yeah, I mean, we can do.
I second.
I'm also.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Guys. All right, so then next on the agenda is subcommittee updates. Okay, I will edit that in. Thank you. Okay, so then the next thing on our agenda is subcommittee updates. And we have it in order for legislation preservation tools, then timelines, archives and curricula, and events, exhibits and trails. So Lydia is gonna give an update on legislation and preservation tools, and I'm going to add any additional materials that you guys might need to know.
Yeah, so legislation, preservation and tools, we have been having different guest speakers explain their processes. So we've been looking at squares and streets and Article 80 modernization, and a lot of it, and even prior to that we had set some goals for ourselves as a committee. And I think that we have pretty wide-ranging discussions, but we keep coming back to the same goals and the same ideas, which is that we really need a survey, a city survey of historic resources. We think that maybe it would be beneficial to combine a citywide historic survey with a cultural resource survey or other types of survey that are under discussion in the city. We also feel that, preservation really has to be put right up front in these processes and should be an integral part of Article 80, not be kind of like a last check off when it's already kind of like a done deal. And, we've had a lot of discussion around the links between historic preservation and cultural vibrancy, cultural preservation, about the issues of like working against displacement, of communities, and also that we need more research about why historic preservation is good for the local economy. Yeah, so those are some of the things we've discussed, and other people, please jump in.
Yeah, a specific thing that I think we talked about when we met with the planning team is IAGs and how they're gonna transform and how they're thinking of transforming those into CATs. I'm forgetting what
Right,
the
CATs, yeah.
community something, I'm not remembering what they stand for, but a question that was asked from that subcommittee was, what does that look like? And how are we ensuring that the change is not in name only, but it's it's a change that will actually affect how the process functions. So I think the next step that we identified was to create like a letter or like a write-up to send to the planning department and to the people who we talked to specifically about what we want to see when it comes to Article 80, because what we got from them was that it's very amorphous and it's still in the beginning stages of the planning. So we want to make sure that they get in writing what the Legislation and Preservation Tools Subcommittee would like to see implemented in a draft form at the very least. Am I missing anything?
Oh, we've also had a lot of discussion about Article 85 reform. You know, there's a lot of consensus around extending the delay period, but also having that delay. Again, it comes back to this thing about being more integrated into other processes. And we've also talked about the importance of addressing demolition by delay. And, you know, are there certain regulatory things that the city can do to prevent that, you know, owners just deliberately letting properties get to that point?
Yeah, and I think the final thing I will say is that we've identified other opportunities to work with other things in the city. So like additional dwelling units, office to housing, naturally occurring affordable housing, and mitigation, how we do mitigation for climate change and deconstruction ordinances and things like that. So I think we're talking a lot about how we can connect the things that we were tasked with doing to existing structures and existing projects. And I think that's it. I think that's
Yeah, so I think we have a lot of consensus in our discussions, but it's not really clear how we make those things happen.
okay. So if that's all, then I'm gonna ask Joe Bagley to present for timelines, archives, and curriculum.
Happy to do so. Our discussions have been really circulating around compiling information in a way that will be inclusive of the broader city as a whole, and coming to recognize just how much our subcommittee needs to integrate with the Events and Trails subcommittee, and how we really are forming a pretty strong basis for where Events and Trails can build from. Not that they're not already building, but that we really kind of need to get going in order to provide as much information as possible to our colleagues in the other subcommittee. Around the discussion of timeline, we met with Jim Barabel, who's been putting together decades of information work on a massive Boston City timeline. I believe we were considering talking about asking to the city to potentially take on the host of that that website massive timeline as part of our recommendations for the commission. That's not, I think, on the agenda today, but maybe we'll come back to that at some point. Since then, he's moved forward with some funding to be able to do a little bit more thorough vetting of that information with some buy-in from other organizations, which has been excellent. And then maybe someday the city can take on that as a host, as it really does represent the entirety of the city. The other thing that we've been working on recently is trying to build something that can be shared online, because we recognize the challenge of building from concepts that are non-visual and non-editable, such as creating a timeline of timelines and archives. And that in order to do that effectively, we really need to share that information out to other community members and other organizations. And in order to do that, we really need to have something online shareable that can be built from, that is essentially designed to open the doors to additional contributions in order to make it as thorough as possible, given the fact that our subcommittee is not representing all the options in the city of Boston. And then most recently, we met, I think it was this week or last week, to talk about some initial website designs, and I'm going to share my screen to show some draft versions of that, which will hopefully benefit the next subcommittee that's coming after us. And one of the things we've talked about is on the main Commemoration Commission website, adding 4 clickable tiles essentially that will look vertical and fill a phone screen as you're scrolling on web. Obviously, we're not going to be hosting information about starting a business in winter in Boston, but we can't make draft sites links work yet. But this would be the concept of 4 separate pages, one for essentially our timeline, one for events, one for trails, and then the last one for archives. That's not what you're seeing, but that's what you'll be getting down the road. The upcoming anniversaries will be a page that will essentially provide residents in Boston a list of what to expect down the road for major anniversaries and events, not necessarily events, but like timeline dates that are coming up, what's next, what's happening, organized by year. We've included this year, we've gone out to 2033 to be inclusive of Quack Walker and the end of slavery. Although our commission is not going to quite make it that far, we want to put that on the horizon. And then within each year, we will be populating it with dates of various commemorative events. In the events tab, similar to the timeline, but more based on actual events that we will be vetting and promoting through the events subcommittee. This is more of a clearinghouse of information, so folks will be able to send this to us. We'll be able to host it through that subcommittee's work, organized by year. We're just presenting the bare bones kind of skeleton of this. Obviously, there's a lot of work that still needs to happen to fill it in. Similarly to the trails, right now we only have the Women's Heritage Trail up there, but this will also give you an example of what the events could look like. These tiles that have an image, a description, and a link to an external site. So this could be both the visual for events page and the trails page. And then obviously, if the subcommittee wishes it to look differently, we will accommodate that. And then lastly, the one that we're working most thoroughly on, because it's the most complicated of our tasks at the moment, the archives tabs, where many of the folks that are on our subcommittee are members of archives, capital A, lots of different versions of what that word could be interpreted as. And we're working on essentially creating a place from where people in Boston can go to this website with a theme or topic that they are interested in researching, and we are going to help guide them to larger data sources. One of the initial goals is to compile a complete, as complete as we can get it, list of archives with open hours in Boston. And then from that, we're going to build a relatively large, but not too large database of what archival sources, archival resources are available for various themes, whether it be Black history, Native history, kind of the first stop shop. We used the metaphor of the concierge desk at the at the entrance to a very large building where you would come to the building as a person in Boston and say, I want to learn about this related to commemoration. And we will be that next step where the person at the desk says, okay, you want to go to Northeastern, you want to go to NACOP, you want to go to Chisney, you want to go to Boston Public Library, City Archives, that kind of thing. And that'll hopefully help folks who are just getting going on their research be able to quickly connect to resources, because many, including many folks in the non-research field that are just getting into this, are not aware of the reality of archives having specific topics, neighborhoods, thematic research collections that would be ideal for research. Just for use an example, Northeastern with Roxbury, for example. So that's what we hope to be, kind of a bit of a mini matchmaker guidepost for initial research in Boston. And I will stop sharing. And
Thank you,
unless
Joe.
anybody else on my committee can think of something I didn't mention, I'm good to go.
All right, thank you, Joe. I know I'm putting Suzanne and Amari on the spot. If you guys want to share a little bit about what we've discussed, and then I can go and you guys can supplement whatever works.
Amari, do you want to say something?
First I want to say, Joe, that was fantastic. And part of what we've been spending a lot of time framing is not only events, but also everything that you outlined. So hats off, seeing everyone else involved in that. I think that was part of the pieces in our committee as we were thinking about what it means to commemorate events. We were thinking about the venue and the platform in which the notification and the articulation of those events would live. And so thank you for doing this piece. And it's a pleasant surprise because in our last meeting, we were talking about what it means to already have something planned and join into a confederation of other people commemorating events. And this seems like it is a platform and a place that folks can see themselves belonging. And so thank you for that.
So I can talk a little bit about what the Events, Exhibits, and Trails Subcommittee has been discussing. I think number one that we've been talking about that keeps coming up is branding, and how we are thinking of branding ourselves and what that would look like. That's one thing. I definitely think we've also been talking about how to do civic engagement. I remember, I think Mari, I think it was, you might have proposed this, of like buckets. So we have categories that we're executing around. So justice, commemoration, tourism, and trying to identify organizations with capacity to execute those projects, and then seeing how we can, if they have funding, or how funding can be acquired for those. So those groups. And I think a lot of what, I think another thing that was suggested was that we need to, well, I think that's obvious, but we need to have a series of activations from April 2025 to August 2026, at least to get to that 250th. And that could include some events that already exist and events that we could come up with ourselves once we find out what is already being done, and then we can identify what's missing. I don't know if I got everything though, but I know that we've been talking a lot about that kind of.
I'll just add, if I may, Hennessy and Amari, that we did talk about this being a citywide commemoration and celebration, and that we have to make sure that every neighborhood in the city feels like they're part of the 250th and the 400th. And that the, 2030 is also in our purview. So, and that, I think, Joe, you've already helped us with some of the branding. I mean, if this website really takes off and it is branded like the city is branded, that's what I've been talking about. It should be branded by the city, that we're doing a great job. So thank you for doing that as well.
Group effort.
Right, amazing. I don't, it says any plans that need approval shall go for a vote. Amanda, I'll defer to you. I don't know that these plans need to. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if that needs a vote or not.
Yeah,
I guess we could just do it for the sake of it.
okay. Lydia asked, what's the best way or point to contribute? And, oh, that's a good point. Joe, if you wanna.
All right. Yeah, this.
I gotta read the question again, sorry. To contribute to this particular best point to contribute, participate, if not in that subcommittee. Got it. Sorry, I misread, Lydia, your question. Email me. I'll put my email in the chat, and I think all of our meetings are open to the public anyway, so anybody can join in. So I'll send that to you in a second.
Okay, I mean, I don't know if legislation and preservation tool says anything that we need to put to a vote, or events, exhibits, and trails, but maybe the website for timelines, archives, and curricula. Let's see. All right, so I think I can launch it now. Let me know if you guys can see it. Next.
Hennessy, should we ask about, should we consider a vote to proceed with some sort of request for the Boston timeline from Jim?
I don't know, because
Okay.
I think that we haven't discussed it enough. We don't know
Okay, that's fine.
what we're doing next.
That's fair.
Maybe for the next meeting, but you could, I know you brought it up a little bit, but you can expand on a little more on, he needs somebody to host.
So, yeah, the long and the short of it is that Jim has created essentially already, should I wait till the vote has finished? I'm sorry. I don't wanna get
No,
ahead.
it's fine. It's
Okay,
finished. We're good.
Right. Jim has put together an amazing website that doesn't really have a public facing page yet. It's a small kind of private host that it's a relatively inclusive list of thousands of dates in Boston, tied to very brief descriptions of those events. It's kind of overkill for what we're looking for the Commemoration Commission. However, it is something that we would take years to create if we tried to do it on our own. The idea was that it would make most sense for this page to be somehow hosted either by a large academic institution or by the city of Boston. And in many ways, the city of Boston makes sense. The mechanism of that is what would need to be figured out, or the options for that would need to be figured out. But I think it was for the meeting that didn't have quorum, the idea was that we were going to present a vote to recommend that the city of Boston be a host for this page. And I wish that we could share it in this meeting to get a broader view of it. But we received a pretty thorough presentation from Jim in our subcommittee. Yes, thank you, Jordana, for clarifying that that he does have private funding, and he is having it. The website is being run by Boston by Foot. I just got an email a couple days ago about joining some of the vetting processes. What was I gonna say? The question for us is, do we want to vote to recommend that the city take it on? An alternative to voting on that now is asking Jim to join a future commemoration meeting, so that the folks that weren't in that subcommittee meeting can kind of see what this was or is. I don't have a preference one way or the other. I don't think that we can come back to the next meeting if we took a vote today with a website online. I think that's a big work in progress or a big project if we were to try to take that on, but it would give us a directive to recommend it.
I agree with Joe. I mean, this is a phenomenal work. As many of you probably know his book, When in Boston, that he did about 20 years ago. And then since then he's continued updating it. And the website he's created allows you to search by topic, by neighborhood, by ethnic group, by date. And it's a tremendous resource that really does belong on, you know, for years it's just existed on his laptop. And I think it's an opportunity for the city really to do something with this. And he did get funding a couple of years ago from the legislature to actually have the BPL hosted, and that didn't work for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to discuss, but it's a tremendous resource and will be a tremendous resource. And he has done this work that this committee has been thinking, wait, how can we do this? How can we do this? And here someone's already done it.
If I may add something, I'd like to agree. I'd like to say that I agree with Joe and Bob. This is already work that's already been done, and this would be our recommendation that the city host it. If the Timelines, Archives, and Curricula Committee is all in favor of it, then I would suggest that the other committees and the commissioners take their advice.
I think if I may, because I was very familiar with this concept project and the data from, probably haven't had an update from Jim in over a year. I think there's no question about the value of the data and the concept. I would love to have the commission basically have a full update from Jim on the funding model and what's needed. Because then we'd all be informed about what the needs are today. And I certainly know that if we're making a recommendation, understanding what the funding needs and implications are at the same time, not that we have to have them in hand, but we should at least understand what those are before taking a vote.
I second that. I've worked on a lot of very large digital projects and they do cost money. So I think finding out more about what Jim needs in order for the city to take it over is a smart way moving forward.
And I think, Jordana, understanding which agency at the city is the best one or ones to handle this request, especially if there is now funding available in a way that perhaps was not the case before, would be an important thing to have a sense of before taking a vote.
Does the Timeline, Archives, and Curricula Committee know how much he needs or how much funding is necessary?
No.
No, we don't. He hasn't shared that with us.
And there's a difference between hosting, the cost of the hosting, the cost of the editing, and the cost of just the previous work that has been done by Jim as well.
Yeah, he shared a cost. He shared a cost, but it was a fixed cost about the website itself. But I mean, it would need staff, it would need editing, it would need a board. Like it would cost money. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Just a minor point, if helpful, I'm more than happy to connect with the city's Department of Innovation Technology team to see what that would look like if the city were a host, to sort of bring them into that conversation. So, Tennessee Joe, I'll feel free to let me know and happy to make that connection.
Yeah, I think previously we weren't sure if we could even go to do it with that kind of question without a vote. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were bringing it up earlier.
Well, I think it certainly could make sense to do the vote to get initial conversations from Do It and initial budgets. If I'm not sure we need a vote for that, but it seems like it is the logical next step.
I wouldn't think that we need a vote for that, since it would just be something that I'm myself, Joe, I could look into 100%. And then
especially if there's a verbal consensus among us as the commission members that it's worth exploring at the next step, I think honestly that's good enough to be in the minutes. my personal opinion is that collectively, Jim is owed a debt of gratitude and a succession plan for this project. I just want to help us all not jump over the process needed to get there.
Would people be interested in inviting Jim to the larger commission meeting? Would that be helpful?
What do you think about asking Jim to put together a proposal?
I like that idea. My only worry with it is that we don't understand yet the structure that Jim's website could even fit into. And I feel like a proposal from Jim from a technical side would potentially be something that square peg round hole. And I want to know more from Do It before we ask him for a proposal. But we could. I just think that I don't think that's the next thing we can do with him, because I don't even know what the financial aspects of our IT office would be for hosting a website, because it probably wouldn't work in our existing boston.gov structure that you all just saw. So that would be I think we need to gather more information from the Do It side of things. Do It's our IT office. I don't know if everyone's aware of that, because you all speak City Hall. And then we can go back to Jim with an update on our end, and then ask him to put together a proposal within that kind of framework, and then bring them back to everybody. And then in the meantime, I can provide updates on that to our subcommittee and to the larger subcommittee as we kind of go forward on that, if that works.
Suzanne?
Sorry. Joe and Chris and others from the city, would it be helpful if a couple of people from the Do It team actually met with Jim? So they can find out what his website would entail to fold it into the city's website? Or what it would entail?
I think that would be what we'd have to do, yeah, for sure.
Margaret?
As an interim measure, could we provide a link on the commission's webpage to this information?
It's my understanding it's not yet publicly hosted, and so there's nothing to link to publicly, unless that has changed recently. It's also my understanding that there's only a limited data set of the data collected that is currently viewable. So I think there are many more technical questions. I hope some of them have been resolved since I last saw the question, but I honestly think Chris Osgood has offered to connect in with Do It. I trust Chris implicitly to report back to us with options and directions, whether that's at the subcommittee level or the full commission level.
Yeah, and in that case,
so yeah, I think the funding that Jim recently received was for like a website to go live, and I think it was going to be hosted through like a walking trail association or something like that. And then in terms of Do It hosting, I guess it all depends on what database, what backend database he is using. And I know in terms of our archives catalog, when we got that, Do It couldn't host what we use, but they do provide us with the boston.gov address, and it's hosted by an outside service. So that is possible that it could be given like a boston.gov address, but be hosted by an outside service. It just all depends on what he's using for his database.
Amari asked, do we feel like it presented and articulated in a way that represents a shared idea of equity and inclusion? If there was a way to confirm.
I think, it's hard to describe this without having a link to something that Jim's created. This is a labor of love that Jim has been working on for 20 or 30 years and has published several articles, several books out of it. I think, there is some pushback in the minutes of one of the subcommittees from way back about how, one person's perspective might not necessarily be inclusive of all of the various different groups in the city that we absolutely need to represent. So I think that, what we'll need to do is audit the data at some point, MRE, in order to make sure that there is it is representative of all of the groups in Boston.
Yeah, I think my sense was that could be an incredible starting point, but without taking on the work of doing the exact level of inclusive addition that both Amari and Noel and Jordana were speaking to or chatting to. I think that's an important consideration to ensure, particularly as this would, if we take a vote on it, be representative of the commission's mandate, which is to be the most inclusive possible telling of Boston's history through commemoration activities that we have ever done. So again, amazing starting point. And it's better to have a starting point than not to have a starting point. But the idea that it would be a complete out of the box storytelling, even from a perspective, I think is not the case.
Just to piggyback on that, we've had a lot of internal discussions in the subcommittee about the best ways to get an inclusive view. And we're starting to kind of move towards the direction of present incomplete, missing something to build from publicly, with a lot of risk involved with that. But that it's so much easier to essentially knowingly put out something that we know is incomplete and get the hopefully kind, thoughtful feedback on, so that we can make it more inclusive, and then trying to do it all up front before it goes live. It's a balancing act, but I think that's what we were thinking about working on for our archive kind of data set online, was to essentially knowingly and openly stating on the website that we know this is incomplete, but we would like you all, the public, to see this so that you can then come to us with easy to get contact information to say, this is missing, I need to be included, my story needs to be included. And just something to kind of consider where that kind of point is in the process between presenting something that's glaringly missing information that is wrong to do so, or and putting it out in a place that is open to being added to.
Noel?
Yeah, I think we're gonna need to do some sort of PR or strategy around that. Because if you put it out and you don't put it out correctly, then what this says is that everybody on this commission took the word of one person, put something together, and now we have a disaster, and now we've got damage control, right? And so I appreciate the perspectives that are here and the intentionality of getting something out there and getting feedback. But this cannot be just get someone in the city to write a press release and we hope this is all good and well. This needs to be part of a distinct, clear, strategic approach. This cannot be somebody goes over here, we do this, and we're just going to upload this. There has got to be a clear communication strategy around this. What journalists, what newspapers, what outlets are we doing to communicate the intentionality around this? Because otherwise, we're going to have a big old mess.
I agree.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and the opportunity for this to be a counter storytelling project as a part of the commemoration, which would for us to consider thinking about it intentionally and building all the parameters, the potential research parameters to make this a counter narrative, counter storytelling project, with this being a basis for which counter stories can be included in both some sort of chronological, sequential, or epic frame for counter stories to be included, counter narratives to be included with this potential timeline. And it could be possible with just the idea of a single story, having never looked at it, and understanding the reputation and the respect and the labor that went into this, but also, you know, wanting the opportunity to ensure that if we're stamping an endorsement as a commission, that we have an opportunity to contextualize it.
Yeah, so next steps for that would be, we could still have the meeting with Do It to see if the possibility to host something exists. But I think, you know, we still need to have conversations about what these things that we put out, what they mean, what they look like, and how we advertise them. So if you guys are okay to move on, let me know. So then, and we'll start on the 6-month report, because I do want you guys to review that. Before we good to do that?
This is the one where we.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm gonna share my screen. And I'll reshare it in the chat.
But they never came to hearing. There's nothing, it never showed up. So I have it for 8-1 and then I could see that.
Yeah, just email.
So, 1 second. All right, there we go. And then I'm gonna share my screen. So you guys can also follow along if you would like. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see this. Thumbs up. Amazing. Okay, so this is the 6-month report. It has a couple different chapters, I guess. Summary, vision, successes, challenges, next steps, and an appendix. So I'll just go through it and then, you know, write questions down, put them in the chat, and then we'll come back together and we'll discuss. All right, so for the summary, I just give an update. We'll now add an update for July. So I just talk about basics. So there's 44 members, 30 have been appointed, and 14 are ex officio. We had our first meeting on January 16th. It was introductory. We had a quorum. The next meeting was on April 30th. It didn't have a quorum, so we couldn't vote for a chair. And then I will, after this, include that we've had our third meeting. We're able to chair, and I'll put any other updates that should go there. For the subcommittees, I talk about similar things. So Events, Exhibits, and Trails has 15 members. For ex officio, eight members attend regularly, which is great. That's quorum. It has recently seen a drop in attendance by appointed members. You guys are busy people. So Timelines, Archives, and Curricula has 15 members, 5 are ex officio, 9 attend regularly, and this subcommittee does have the strongest attendance. Legislation and Preservation Tools has 14. Of the 14, 6 are ex officio, 7 members attend regularly. It has seen the largest amount of turnover, with 1 appointed member expressing intent to leave and 3 ex officio members leaving the city. So 3 staff do have alternates and designees, so it hasn't been too bad of a transition, but this subcommittee does struggle the most with consistent attendance from ex officio members. All right, so the vision. So it has a mission statement and the goals, and I think it outlines a lot of what we've been talking about. So the mission statement is as follows. The commission exists to affirm that our diverse, intertwined community histories are of great value to the city of Boston. That historical tourism should be a driver of true shared prosperity. That inclusive and honest historical memory is a crucial public good worthy of attention and resources. And that communities all over the city should have the tools and resources to research, preserve, acknowledge, and celebrate their history. The purpose of the Commemoration Commission is to highlight the importance of historic and cultural preservation of Boston. Like the Office of the Boston Bicentennial, the Commemoration Commission was created to reflect on our histories and pour into the mechanisms to support, protect, and boost history. Unlike the Office of the Boston Bicentennial, the Commemoration Commission was created with the express purpose of uncovering blind spots, dealing with both noble and oppressive legacies, and connecting current Bostonians with the histories, ideologies, and truths that mattered enough to shape the past and to shape the present. The creation of the Office of Historic Preservation and the Commemoration Commission affirms the purpose for its existence matters, and that the execution of the plans created by the commission will not only matter, but will have the opportunity to shape the future of our city. And then I go to the goals that the commission has. I do it by subcommittee. So for events, exhibits, and trails, we've talked about having a website, Boston specific 250th and 400 branding, a marker / plaque commemoration program. So 250 plaques or 250 markers for 250 and 400 for 400. That also includes digital markers, digital maps, and digital guides for tourists. Neighborhood, cultural, and historical walking trails that don't already exist, or haven't been legitimized, whatever that means. Got parades, reenactments, festivals, fireworks, block parties, media partners, advertising, and collaborating with Boston celebrities. Engagement with the arts, a series of programming from April 2025 to August 2026. Engaging small or medium-sized businesses and cultural institutions. We also have like official beverages. We need to talk about like engaging with local distilleries to create like 250 beverages, which I thought was fun. So Timelines, Archives, and Curricula has identified several ideas, including a website, a history database, or a resource database, I should say. We've talked a lot about Boston neighborhood stories and how much we really liked the bicentennial, what the bicentennial did with that. Maybe doing it with books, podcasts, video series, and more. Data, resources, and archives collection and curation. That's like what we are trying to do right now with the website. Language access and other accessibility accommodations. Uncovered obfuscated histories through research, museum curations, BPL exhibits, BPS curriculum, and internships, and digitizing archives. So for legislation and preservation tools, we've had Article 85 reform, extending delay and reframing delay to another process. Article 80 modernization, implementing historic preservation earlier in the Article 80 process. I should say Article 80 is the demolition delay of historic buildings or buildings older than 50 years old, and inside of historic districts. Grading systems for buildings to understand like a building's history and its historicity within its environment, and grading systems for demolition for predictability, which might be implemented after citywide survey or before. Mitigation and mitigation funds when demolition happens for environmental impact and lost cultural or historic impact. Simplifying the landmark petition process. More historic districts and more weight and legitimacy for cultural districts. A deconstruction ordinance for climate change mitigation. Collaboration with the Community Preservation Trust Office, and existing projects like affordable housing. And inside of that, naturally occurring affordable housing, office housing, additional dwelling units, things that we've talked about. Economic studies about why historic preservation is good for the local economy, jobs, and affordability. As well as investments in other studies and preservation tools. And then the final thing is citywide historic and cultural resource survey. All right, so next part is successes. I talk about the fact that there were 30 commissioners sworn in ahead of the first meeting in January, and many were sworn in November 16th at the Office of Historic Preservation Vision event that commission staff organized. Commission staff, okay, this talks about just me like interviewing and meeting you guys, not a big deal. There's a picture, this is a picture I took, which is the city clerk swearing in some of you guys at the Bolden Building on November 16th. I talked about, so right here that we work closely with the archaeology team. We've planned and executed events that center archaeology with a commemorative focus. We had an event in Charlestown a little while ago to discuss goals for an archaeological dig for the 250th of Bunker Hill. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. And we also are working together to launch a series of guides, which you guys have seen, that will live on the City of Boston website as a product that will come out of the commission as a collaborative effort. Talk about, two people have stepped up to be the commission chairs, and each subcommittee has 2 commission chairs. I also talk about how often we've met since we first started in January. And there is an internal project management group made up of staff members from multiple city departments, including economic opportunity, tourism, sports, and entertainment, neighborhood services, arts and culture, and I'm missing some maybe, but they're focused on trying to execute events around the city. So they formed and they've begun to meet. And I think they're trying to figure out how to most effectively collaborate with the commission and implement the events, quote unquote, aspect of the subcommittee's charge and the commission's charge. Externally, I say that we have been, functioning as a representative. I've been functioning as a representative of the city. And so whenever I attend community engagement events, I've employed surveys to get resident feedback about the kinds of commemorations they want to see. And so we've gotten an increase in people messaging me and talking to me, which is great. I've also been active in Bunker Hill 250 in Charlestown. That's a planning group, and they're hitting the ground running. Everybody knows, I talk about them all the time. And they are identifying a series of events to take place between 2025 and 2026. They're looking for funding. I think they're zoning in on branding. They have more planned. I have also connected with other organizations to start understanding what they are looking for. And I have identified the need for social media engagement. I have created social media accounts that have many followers because I keep getting banned, but we're back. So that's part of it. And then next section is challenges. So I said that one of the barriers that we're struggling with is open meeting law because it requires commissions to have a quorum. And there are 44 commissioners in total, and that means that a quorum for a commemoration commission is 23 members, which is a lot. It's a lot to get all of you together. And because of that, there hasn't been consistent and adequate attendance for the quorum requirement. And that holds true for the subcommittees as well, because it's difficult to get people together at any given point in time, but especially to get people together and have that be such a large group of people on a consistent basis. In addition, as all public bodies are subject to open meeting law, communication on most matters that have a quorum must be properly noticed. That means it prohibits serial communication between a quorum, including email, and that has not been properly noticed. And since the subcommittees and the commission have been tasked with putting together plans and projects, the inability to work on and follow up on plans and projects through email has impeded the progress of the commission and the subcommittees that they might make on their tasks. And I said, and so then the next part is, as the commission and the subcommittees more specifically define what success looks like, an assessment of resources necessary to achieve those goals will need to be undertaken. And so the next section is key questions. I took that from questions that you guys have asked repeatedly, and I found to be important. So the first question is a commission the best apparatus to engage in the work outlined by the ordinance? And the explanation for this is that this question has come up because of the open meeting law. And perhaps there is a better way to engage you all that doesn't require to be under open meeting law. The second question is, how can we get the Commemoration Commission staff and staff of other departments to more meaningfully work together? The explanation for this is that there's an internal project management group working on the 250th and 400th events to be planned and executed by the city. But there might be use in identifying departments that would undertake plans recommended by the commission and the other subcommittees, so that relevant city department members are part of a project management group that support the separate plans and goals of each subcommittee. And then the third question is, given that some of the recommendations made by the commission will fall uniquely under the Office of Historic Preservation's purview, and that the commemoration currently lives there, can the Office of Historic Preservation and internal Commemoration Commission team have a budget for this specific purpose? The explanation for that is there will be ideas recommended by the commission, obviously, in which the most relevant department to undertake and implement those ideas is the Office of Historic Preservation, which does not currently have the budget to implement projects related to commemoration. All right, so the fifth component is next steps. Looking ahead, the Commemoration Commission and its support staff have laid down several opportunities to push the agenda of each subcommittee and the express goals of bringing value to the city through commemoration and historic preservation. These opportunities include investigating solutions to the challenges the commissioners face within the confines of open meeting law. Other opportunities include identifying proper support for the Commemoration Commission and its team, as well as identifying collaborative opportunities and then enacting said collaboration. In addition, the commission will be working on the planning for materials that will be executed by other departments. So it will be working on materials that will be categorized and publicized as functioning under the Commemoration Commission, Office of Historic Preservation, and affiliated departments. Since many residents have identified the Commemoration Commission team as a starting place to express interest in commemorative activities, there is hope that social media will be useful in promoting the Commemoration Commission, significant anniversaries, and other important commemorative undertakings and projects to a larger audience. And then there's an appendix. It just has all of you guys listed, including the organizations that you are a part of. Because this exists in many iterations, but I figure it's never bad to continue to include this. Yeah, that's what we have. All right. So comments, questions, concerns, suggestions.
Thank you, Hennessy, for putting all this together.
Yeah, of course. So we're all good? No.
Yeah, good job. How do we support advocacy around some of these points that are made?
Depends which points.
Oh, like for more capacity?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm advocating for us to get more staff all the time. Does that mean I'll get it? Not necessarily, but I am advocating for it.
Well, so there are ways members of the commission can help you advocate for these things. I mean, you shouldn't be the only one doing all of this work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be helpful for us to come together and write out what we envision might be helpful for us to reach our goals. Separate from this report that's going to the city clerk. And that might just be you guys emailing me, because we just don't ever have the time to get you all together. Emailing me what you guys think we should be pushing for, and then I'll write it up again. It's a good question. How much should I ask? Yeah, Lynn?
Should this be a formal communication between this body and the mayor?
It can be, if that's what we feel is best practice.
I'm not sure what other authority there is that's gonna, certainly, you know, as far as the budget's concerned, but.
Yeah, that's a good question. Jordana, and then Chris, and then Suzanne.
I looked at the legislation recently, and it's a little bit unclear about whether or not there is 2 positions or 2 part-time positions or 2 full-time positions. And I remember reading that in the beginning, when Kenzie was in the process of writing the legislation, and remember being confused by it even back then. So, you know, I mean, is there a way that we as a commission can push that forward? So it's not just you on your lonesome?
I think we can really lean on the bad math, because it says the equivalent of 2 full-time staff. And then what it adds up to when they say 1 person for this, 1 person for this, is they say 1 half-time and 1 half-time, and that only adds up to 1, which I guess would be me. But you can lean on the fact that it says 2, the equivalent of 2 full-time.
Yeah, I think.
Tricky.
Great. Yeah, so I mean, if there's anything that we as a commission can do to push that forward, then please let us know how we can be helpful for that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we talked about in our subcommittee meeting was you know, all of the changes in historic preservation and how that's a challenge for you and also for the commission. And, you know, I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record of, you know, when Murray Miller left and also when Mariama White Hammond left, Hammond White, and, you know, having, you know, a sort of leadership vacuum in the commission has been a challenge for the commission itself and also for you.
Let's see if anyone wants to speak and then add a little bit to that.
And this sort of in some ways built on Joanne's point, which I think there's sort of two separate pieces, but Hennessy, I'll please feel free to correct me on that. This one is sort of how we support the commission overall. And I think Hennessy, we can think about, and happy to work with you, Chief Sweat, others to think about how we can do that. There's a separate piece, which is how we implement the recommendations of the commission. And I think for that set of work, which I think is similar to perhaps one of the comments in the chat, I think we need to sort of identify, and maybe this has already been done, here's the projects that we want to do them well, here's the budget that will take, which I think would sort of help us think about how we then marshal the resources to do this work. This is my first commission meeting, so I may be very off on that but I think those are two slightly separate pieces, both of which I appreciate need some attention.
I can get back to that a little bit after Suzanne and Chelsea.
I'm just wondering if we can, in the report to the city clerk, elevate the need for a budget more. Because without a budget, nothing's gonna happen unless it's done externally.
Yeah, I mean, where do you think it's best to, like, in challenges?
Or let's see. Under maybe even the key questions. It's not. I mean, I think that I don't want to speak for all the commissioners, but what I've heard along the way consistently is that there needs to be a budget.
And so you mean separate from the third one that's talking about the Commemoration Commission team having a budget for things that have things that the commission does that has a purview? Or do you mean like the Commemoration Commission needs to have a budget to execute?
No, the city needs to have a budget to execute any of the activities that the city will be executing.
Yeah, like a commemoration, like a 250 specific something.
I mean, even putting signage up on city light poles takes money.
Chelsea? Oh, Chelsea, I can't hear you. I think Chelsea's working on her own. Okay, perfect. While she writes that, I remember John Borders and Tourism Sports Entertainment let us know it's kind of a two-way street. They ask for, like, the city will ask for us to create a plan and then budget that, but we've also been, you know, I do remember that the Advanced Business and Trail Subcommittee pushed back on that because they were like, we don't know how big we can go without an understanding of what kind of budget we have. So that's something. Chelsea, is there a method to make these advisory groups center commissioned? Yes. So the method to do that is to reach out to IGR, get their templates to write a letter, explain why we would like this to go from a commission to an advisory group. Make sure that people who would push back and or care about the commission, like city councilors, mayor, et cetera, are aware that this is something that is being considered. And then the law department would write something to repeal the current ordinance that establishes this. And then replace it, essentially same thing, but with an advisory committee. It would fix the open meeting law issues and then the quorum issues that we're having. Yeah, and I have talked to the chief and to the law department about this, so it is a viable option. But Chris, if you want.
I mean, it's just to sort of reinforce what you just said. I think there's a set of next conversations there, and happy to pursue them, and whether it makes sense to come back to this body before taking any action. And we can talk through that about what the right sort of process is. Also happy to think through what some of the external funding might look like for this. Again, I think I'm looking at a screen of people who have done far more fundraising than I ever have, and mindful of that. But I do think that as some of these really powerful ideas crystallize, I think it gives us an ability to be able to go pursue potentially external funding from foundations or other locations. And Hennessy, all happy to happy to sort of connect some dots with the city team on that.
Great. Noel?
I apologize, I had to step away for a call, but about the switch to advisory groups, what would be the implication for that in terms of our federal funding and federal legislation? Because the city of Boston is one of 4 cities listed in the federal legislation. So what would the ramifications be if we move to advisory groups? And it could be something from, could we potentially be the only city without a commission that's listed in the commission legislation? Does that affect the willingness of our representatives and senators to get us additional funding or support? So I just ask those questions because this is more than, I know the struggles of quorum and things like that. But as we think through this, know that we have a different light on us than another city. And so even having the conversation around removing the commission can have bigger consequences than perhaps what we're aware of at this moment.
That's a great point. I think, we'll have to definitely follow up to make sure that switching from a commission to an advisory committee doesn't hurt us. And if it were to do so, then we'd have to have a different conversation. So I think that is also part of our next steps.
Yeah, and Hennessy, I mean, it's not just the political or financial. We do have to think about the PR and perception. Because then what it'll say is that the city of Boston is not taking this anniversary so seriously. So we really do need to think about this. I understand the logistical issues around this, but there are some significant consequences here.
Absolutely. David and then Margaret.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar, that while it may be useful to have advisory groups that can continue doing the work, having a smaller oversight commission body that still is the public face and the public dimension to the work, so I think there's a compromise here that could possibly be a more viable option than a complete switch. But I know the city law department has good experience and strong opinions on the right way and wrong way to do this kind of thing. So we have experts we can leverage to understand how to do this, especially given that this was a city council initiative that then the mayor appointed. So there's a level of complexity to governmental and governance issues here that I think is more complicated than a simple can we switch or not.
Makes sense. Margaret, sorry.
Might it be possible that a hybrid of the commission remaining a commission, but the subcommittees being advisory groups, so that those committees can advise the commission, and you might not have the same quorum issues at the committee level? it doesn't solve all of the problems, but it may allow some work to proceed in the interim a little bit more efficiently. Again, just food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they would allow that, I think that would be great. I think subcommittees do the bulk of the work anyway, because we only meet every quarter. Yeah, I think that if that's possible, we could do something like that. We just have to figure out what configuration they would allow.
I would be curious if Dr. Trent has any thoughts on that, as given how passionately you spoke about.
I mean, I think the reality is there's some business that's got to get done, right? And so what is the most effective way? Is it, because right now we're in an either or conversation. Margaret, I like the hybrid idea. But I think you need to think of an and, not that we need more things on this. But if we're, I'm listening to this conversation and it really feels like we're going to position ourselves to look really not as prepared as other cities. And there would be a gross misconception of what's happening in Boston. You know, there's a lot of people out here who are trying to really push us forward as where the revolution began. And so any attempt to reduce the commission is going to be interpreted as the city of Boston does not take the 250th seriously. And everyone on this call will be implicated in that. That is not a good look for any of us. And so there's the business of the work being done. And so whether that is funding, whether that is additional advisors, the creation of advisors to do this, what is the work being done? But I get very concerned about any talk of changing the commission, going to the city council, asking for the commission to be changed so work can get done without considering the public perception and what's that's going to say to other people. Remember, they're projecting, Meet Boston's projecting something like 37 million people coming in a very tight period of time. What will that do to our tourism dollars? How's that going to affect me and Suzanne and some of the economic interest of the city, right? So there's the convenience of the work, but there's also the lasting impact of the perception that we're not giving enough consideration to. I understand this is very serious, but we have got, we're all kind of feeling like we need to get the work done, and we absolutely do. But if we're not careful, we're going to cut off our nose to spite our face.
I have to agree with Noelle, and we've been working very, very hard for many, many years with Bob Allison at the head of Revolution 250, with events already that have taken place, and even all of us working together in conversation of how do we move forward. I think that if we dilute what we're doing, it is going to have a bad appearance. And if you look at any of the other major cities across the country, they're light years ahead of what we are doing right now.
So, all right, so we'll pause on that, on changing it. And potentially the conversation is not necessarily about changing the commission, but the best ways to provide support to the commission so that we can actually we can actually create a plan for the city to execute. All right, so then we'll put that on. Do we have any final comments about that? Okay. Because if not, I think this kind of transitions into essentially what we're talking about, best practices, establishing themes and goals, and discussing stakeholders. So I think a question that Amanda had posed that I think is a good question. Is what the city's priorities for commemoration are. Like knowing what needs to be commemorated and determining the tools that we have in the city to commemorate those things. So that's one thing, but I think what are the
I can
goals?
elaborate a little bit, Hennessy,
Yes,
if you'd like
yeah,
me to.
that'd be great.
We're officially charged with, developing and executing a plan to mark upcoming historical anniversaries, right? And it named two things specifically, which is, I'll butcher this, I'm sure, Sesquicentennial 250 and 400th anniversary of Boston. So, we know the highlights of what we always commemorate. So I think it would really help to sort of establish that framework so we could say, these are the upcoming historical anniversaries that we need to commemorate, right? And if there's anything missing, what are our priorities to seek out and commemorate, right? So we kind of need to establish, is that sort of our task, is to just focus on 250 and 400? Like, what does this mean exactly? How do we kind of fill in what we want to prioritize? So I think that would be a good conversation for us to have, is like, what do we need to seek out?
So
I think that we in the subcommittee for timelines especially felt that that was that was what was being asked of us to do. And we've had quite a few conversations about that. I think what we've gotten to the point of is that we need to be able to create that timelines list of events and make sure that's vetted, and then bring it to this commission to, I don't think choose is the right word, but essentially come to the commission with a list of events. Is what one of the directives that we felt that our subcommittee was responsible for. Obviously, we're not doing that right now, but I think that that would be what we would hope to get to now that we've have a little bit of a structure to place that kind of information into. But that doesn't mean I have that information to share today.
The other thing I was kind of thinking about when we were talking about the, when in Boston timeline, is that if we sort of flip the narrative on that and say, we propose that the city of Boston create a framework, technology that will house this type of thing. And then Jim's data set is one point that gets dropped into that framework. And then that's how we can sort of create, like the framework that all of us can each contribute to and say, this is what we are contributing to this timeline. And then Jim's, data set is just one, I'm saying that right, Jim? His data set is just one point of which we add to. And then we can also crowdsource, additional things that will sort of stay in a queue that need to be vetted in some way. But just kind of flip that. So it's the city of Boston is creating this, we're asking for contributions. And we're also all, as a commission contributing to that. I think that could change the narrative a little bit on what is, hosted on that timeline, and then what still is, waiting in the wings to get uploaded.
I also want to just flag that it's 3:30. We have 30 minutes left. So I want to include, we should still be talking about these best practices, these goals, but also the planning discussion. I'll include it as well in this discussion. It's about beginning proposals if we're there. We also might not be. Two relevant departments and stakeholders to begin working with us and creating an outline of the plan, or at least figuring out who's missing, who needs to be in our planning. And then what questions should this commission be asking as we do commemoration? And what are the benchmarks and timelines for the planning process? I think that might be the benchmarks and timelines for this planning process might be the most important thing that we take out of this meeting. If our goal is to start, let's say if we're just doing Bear 250, rah rah America revolution, right? Then right, our first date would be what, if I'm not mistaken, April 18th, 2025? Or is it right?
Actually, okay, this is all happening next year, and there are groups in different communities already at work planning these things,
Mhm.
okay? I know Charlestown has lots of things happening in June of 2025, because that's the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Mhm.
East Boston, Chelsea, and Revere, people in the communities are working together to plan reenactments of the Battle of Chelsea Creek. Big event that happened in May of 2025. Every March in South Boston, we have Evacuation Day. The
Mhm.
real event, it's going to be 2026, but there are plans to bring oxen, bringing cannon across Massachusetts between December of 2025 and March of 2026. So we have been talking about the frameworks for this commission while these other groups have been working without any city support. From my standpoint, the critical thing we need to do is get the mayor on board with this. The real reason the bicentennial happened was because Mayor White said, we've got to do something. As Noel said, we are being left behind. Philadelphia is cleaning our clock in terms of tourism, historical tourism. Every other cities recognize the importance of this. Boston really hasn't. We have the stuff, and this is our opportunity to show it off. So yeah, things are going to happen whether this commission ever issues a report or not.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, things have been happening, right? So I think part of what we have to figure out is what, if we are tasked with doing this planning, this whatever, these recommendations, what is it that we are able to recommend that isn't being undertaken, or that what kind of support can we recommend to these organizations? Like what we recommend, like that the city create like a grant program so that people can apply for funding, things like. But I think that there has to be a time limit on when we start, when we do that, right? Like we have to release that at some point. It's part of our charge. So I think the question is, what date should we be preparing for that plan to go out so that I can start figuring out how we will execute that.
Yeah.
that.
Hennessy, I can add from the Charlestown perspective is that we're kind of at the point now where we're looking for direction from the city in terms of funding and security and operations and all of that. So I'm not sure if this is the place to sort of create that plan, and maybe it's just saying like, hey, communities, you're doing all of this work. What do you want to commemorate, around the topic of 250 in your community? Here's the structure to interact with the commission and, city departments to sort of make this happen. So maybe that could be something that we could sort of help with as a commission. I'm not sure, because I'm not sure sort of where, other than, keep meeting with Hennessy and Joe and, others about like, where do we go next? Like, how do we actually get this done? Because a lot of it's just pipe dreams and, we've got a great program, but we don't have a single dollar yet, so things like that I think could be helpful.
Yeah, and I feel like on our committee, we've also been saying the same thing. And, for the city folks, for at least for me, what would be helpful to know is what help you need in order to get the green light to get the capacity in order for this to be a city thing or not. Because in our committee, we talk about what is the incentive for people who are already running something to put a City of Boston logo on their thing that they've already raised the money for to commemorate with people they already know in the neighborhoods or communities they already live in. There's no incentive. And so like, what is the incentive for a confederation to come together and without knowing what it is? And And because the data's in the books and other places already have things, like it shouldn't be a contingent upon us to say, hey, here's what other people are doing, because it's easily accessible by the internet. Someone just needs to make a decision, and having the least experience in city government, I don't know who does, because otherwise people will just do their thing, and the things that Boston will be known for in the 250 will be the things that we're normally known for on the 4th of July. And so there'll be no difference. Hopefully if that's what happens, those things will be fantastic so that Boston doesn't look embarrassed when there's 8 World Cup games and tall ships. And the only thing that we're doing is illuminating the thing that we normally illuminate. So I couldn't agree more. We have to stop meeting if we're going to keep doing this. Let's stop. And if people are not been coming to meetings, it's because we've been coming to meetings and saying this, and then we spend the meeting having the same conversation around what capacity that everyone on here knows that we already need, because other places have already done it, and it's either not coming or not. And so like I don't know the budget, I don't know the timeline. So someone should say, here's when we'll have a budget to decide, here's the 5 people from the city that'll be on this or not. Otherwise, we're going to keep having these same conversations in meetings, and then people will do work and it'll just sit there. And if I'm sounding frustrated, it's just because every meeting we have the same conversation. And there are things happening in communities of color who are raising money to do these things. I'm not sure what I would say to them as someone on this commission to say, you should put that logo on your thing that you've already raised the money for and have already built community to do, because we just haven't done it. And we have a lot of good ideas to try to shortcut a solution that, I think half of us, 100% of us are not sure that, that's the right way, but given the fact that there's nothing, we feel compelled to go with things. So I don't know, I feel like I'm talking a lot and I'll stop, but I just want to echo this underlying desire to be helpful and to provide you and others capacity so that this could be something.
Joe, and then Noel, and then I'll read Chelsea's comment. Oh, and then Chris.
It's similar to what Chelsea put in the chat, but to somewhat answer Mari's question with the timeline, I think we have to go out this in 2 different paths, because one of those paths is FY25 budget has been passed. That goes through June 31st. I would love to know if there's any option for funding anything that's going to happen before the end of June next year, because that is inclusive of the occupation of the beginning of the siege of Boston and Charlestown, everything. After that, we're really talking about another budget year. So I feel like that's 2 different kind of conversations that we have to have. The only thing that I can see for this current budget year, and then there may be others, I'm not the budget person, maybe Margaret can talk about this a little bit. Is there any capacity or willingness within this Community Preservation Act funds to support FY25 commemoration related things, and then down the road in future years, because that's, as far as I can see, the only history related pool of money left in city budget that's up to June of next year. And if CPA could have capacity to support commemoration events, knowing that it's mostly for historic preservation buildings, and I know that that's going to take some real mental gymnastics from the law department to figure that one out, but that's a big pool of money, and curious about that as an option. Oh, and then just to finish the thought, I think that we need to do something for the upcoming, we need to have a recommendation upwards by no later than the fall from our commission, because that's the only way we're going to have any sort of ability to do something before June of next year. But that needs to come with like, and we're also going to be putting forth a longer list of recommendations down the road. But I think we need to do something really soon for the FY25 budget year.
Yeah, so I echo Amari and Bob's frustration around this. At this point, I know from a strategy perspective, we really think about the city budget, but even when we were first formed, we were formed already behind budget conversations. So there was no way that this commission could have made an informed decision and recommendation for the FY25 budget. And we just all have to reconcile with it. That's what happened. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's what happened, right? So at the end of the day, the thing that the biggest issue we have is there is no clear idea of what the city of Boston is committed to spending on the 250th, right? Not really in terms of us making a recommendation of how things should be allocated. I can tell you because I was in Williamsburg for the Common Cause convening with other states, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Charleston, Virginia, at the state level and at the city level, already have those numbers dedicated. And we're talking, I think the lowest number I heard was 25 million. So if we need to say the city, you either talk to corporate sponsors, you talk to foundations, you talk to whomever, this is the money we need to do it. And the reason why we're saying, and part maybe it means restructuring this report that goes to the clerk, is to say, yes, these are the challenges, these are successes, but at the end of the day, this council was put at a disadvantage. This commission was put at a disadvantage when they convened. There was no way that we were going to be able to do the thought work in the different ways that it was prescribed and the way that you brought us together to get an adequate budget to do what we can do at the same level of our peer institutions, and more specifically, those cities in the legislation. So, too late now, cry about it later. This is what we need. We need probably over the next 2 years, you're talking $50 million because that's going to go back into the city. We're talking about major economic drivers, right? So we just need to go ahead, and I don't know if it's now or if it's later. If we want to say we want 10 million, we're recommending $10 million for grants. We're recommending X amount of money for the office so that you can have people do the work. Because right now, relying on very busy people to do the work for you is not going to help you on a truncated timeline. And you have 12 weeks to make a decision about how you're going to operate as a city about it. And we need to be able to, I don't know if it's this commission or anybody else, we got to go to city council and say, you drug your feet on this. This is the issue. If you want Boston to be competitive around 250, the time is now. We don't have time for these other conversations, right? We've lost time, and it's no one's fault on this call. It was how this thing came together. We were put at a disadvantage. So for us to get the boost we need to run ahead and get something meaningful done, this is what we need. And we can't rely on it officially happening through the city budget. Y'all passed a supplemental budget. You talk to some corporations, you find partners. The city has got to do it, but the city of Boston did not get the money set aside, and the cities that have been doing it are cleaning our clock. We don't have a brand for Boston. State of Massachusetts has a brand. We don't have a brand for the city of Boston for 250, right? So we need to figure out how much is it going to cost for us to invest in a quality brand and marketing campaign. I don't know what the city spent on stuff like that in the past. Maybe you ask somebody from Meet Boston. Maybe we just throw out a figure. Maybe we say we want a $10 million campaign. They may say we want 5, right? But those are the things that we've got to do, and we have to do it now because we're out of time.
So just thinking about some next steps then, I think there is, I'm happy to Hennessy work with you and think about what we might be able to do within the context of the FY25 budget, which, as folks are probably aware, but essentially runs from July 1 of this year through June 30th of next year. And similarly, a bit to Joe's point and Dr. Trent's point, sort of how we position ourselves for the FY26 budget, which is an effort that we really start at the end of this calendar year. The thing which will help us unlock both FY25 and FY26 city funding and potentially CPA funding, and Joe, we can take sort of that analysis as a next step too. Hennessy, happy to think about how to coordinate with the law department, but whether that's a possible route, is getting specific about sort of the things which this group would most think, or would most want to invest in. What are the areas that would and priorities that we should be defining? And I definitely agree. I understand sort of having a ballpark sense of what is possible will help that conversation. So Hennessy, happy to think about what some follow-up would look like there. Beyond funding, I think also to understand how this commission and how the city can be helpful in amplifying messaging, coordinating if where important, adding recognition around events, ideas, initiatives that we think are most important, are sort of some of the other pieces that I think are useful to define. And I know the working groups are already doing, but your points around sort of capacity to be able to do this work are certainly well heard. So and happy both to think about and to see how we follow up on the specifics and whether quarterly timelines are sort of actually, whether that's the right pace to be able to come back to this group and to really engage in the conversations that we need to have later this summer and early this fall.
Yeah, it's great. To Chelsea's question in the chat, can the commission vote to ask for funding from the city treasury or budget department? I mean, yes. It can be included in the report and sent out. And because the report is going out at the end in less than a week. So I think there's an existing structure for it to be sent out and have the urgency there. I know that Murray did ask for a budget for 2025. He asked for $260,000. Don't know. I don't know what happened. I assume nothing. But yeah. So I don't know that there is a chance to ask for that. But I also would like to connect with the Office of Economic Opportunity and Tourism, Sports, and Entertainment, because neither of them are here, because they would be the people who, if they are going to be serious about doing commemorative events, they would be the department that would help us with the funding.
It seems like a good idea to start now for the 2026 budget and, checking in with that office. I mean, what about the commission writing a letter to the mayor? Because I think that in addition to the city budget allocation, somebody should be raising money from the private sector. Like the Boston Foundation, the hotel industry, the convention centers, all the different players. And that's not going to be us, I think, but maybe we need to give a political push to make sure that that gets taken on.
Yeah, Joe, and then Chris.
I just wanted to comment. Somebody else said it before, and I wanted to bring it back up again. I feel like the best function for this group here would be essentially making recommendations for allocation of funds, because I'm all for arts and tourism and culture and any of the other branches of city government coming up with some of these ideas. My worry is that those things need to be vetted through the lens of diversity and inclusion. And I feel like that's what this group is really going to be great at doing, is to make sure that any of the resources that are coming out are viewed or distributed equitably. And it would be ideal if that was basically all we did. I mean, I think even the website that I poked at, I think that's useful information to folks, but I really feel like we should be the ones making sure that money is doled out appropriately. And that's what I thought the function of the commission would be back when it was being proposed as legislation, is to just be like the city's group of concerned folks who are going to vet the process and make sure that all the money doesn't go just to one or two things, and that anything that is distributed has all of our concerns built into it. But again, that's not possible without a pool of money. Instead, we're doing things like making timelines and websites about archives. But can that be something that we become? Obviously, we would need money to do that, but is that something we can then structure ourselves to be?
Chris?
Joe, happy to think through what that could look like. And correct me if I'm wrong, to the extent that there are sort of other allocation decisions that are being made associated with some of the commemoration events, having this group basically be an advisory body, a vetting body for those allocations. Is that right? I might have totally misheard you.
Or even just the ones that make like, we could be the equivalent of the CPA for commemoration money. The folks that go over all the projects that are proposed and allocate very, very consciously and carefully.
That is helpful. I do think, and again, I am here sort of in this meeting really representing Chief Sweat, and I'm somewhat new to this process itself. But I do wonder, I think a bit to Lydia's point, like I think having a sense of what is being asked for, and maybe what is being asked for is a pool of grant funding, but being able to define these are the things we are looking to do, or the things we are looking to raise funding for, I think is the first step. We'll sort of strengthen the ask quickly as we go into the FY26 budget building process, or looking at what might be available, as has been raised, and agree with this point, ways the city can be helpful in raising external funds for programs, events, et cetera. So I'm not sure, maybe a tremendous amount of this has already happened, but to the extent that we have defined, here's the things that we would want to invest in or do, that resources would go to, I think that will help in securing resources for it.
If I can jump in, I do think that there have been like 3 material changes recently, even as late as today's meeting, which are significant. I agree with what's been said about this journey way behind the 8 ball, much too late, an overly complicated charter, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to take all of that as read. But I do think we do at the city now have a new chief of environment, who is trying to get up to speed as fast as possible. And this initiative from a city administration point of view lives within that cabinet. So that's one thing. Today's meeting, we finally got to, with quorum, elect 2 co-chairs. So the commission now has elected leadership. And with all of your work there and Hennessy's coordination, there is now a written report that begins to articulate some of the things that are actually necessary for Boston to even have a shot at having a successful commemoration. So honestly, I think the most important thing that happens next is that all of that gets put in front of city stakeholders. And I'm hearing from Chris, Joe, and Hennessy in particular, and I'll lend my own voice, the commitment to do that, so that we can put more, I think, guardrails as a city around what we actually want and how best to respectfully engage all of you who are volunteering or giving of your time and energy and passion and history to make this possibly work. So I think we are at a very good inflection point, but to everybody else's point, I agree with, we've got to deliver within the next few weeks, or we're just spiraling and not going anywhere.
So I'll ask what would it take to change our enabling legislation? I outlined it for the advisory committee because it was like simpler. I think it might take a little bit more than just meeting with stakeholders and then writing a letter and then having the law department issue a repeal. I mean, that's the basic process, but it depends on what exactly we are trying to change. I mean, I assume that if, for example, we try to change it to be like what Joe was saying, how CPA works, I think that might be a little bit complicated. I would not assume that that would be simple. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. It's 4. It's about to be 4. I want to make sure that we leave with next steps. Obviously, I think my next steps are clear, but in general, I just want to make sure that we wrap up with what next steps look like for us, and maybe not for the commission at large, but for the city, the city group. City. I mean, I know we've talked about potentially, sorry, no, all this stuff too.
Just Hennessy, you said you think your next steps are clear. Would you or anyone else from the city just kind of restate for everybody so we're on the same page what you're identifying as the next steps for you? Because otherwise we're all going to be thinking different things.
I should specify, I think my personal next steps are clear, not the city's. So I'm obviously gonna have to check in with Chris and with the new chief Brian about what, I mean, and I have already been doing so, but I think it's really urgent now to sit down and identify what exactly it is that this commission can do, and what it needs to be doing and how the city needs to be supporting it appropriately. That's one thing. Everything else on the side, like, sure, we'll have the meeting with Do It about Jim Braveville, whatever. But I think my express goal is obviously, I will review the report one more time. I can do a third version, send that out if I need to, and that one can include what we've talked about in terms of needing a budget. I will do meeting minutes, obviously, because I think there's a lot we talked about that needs to be included, and if that needs to also be a letter to the mayor, it's on my to-do list, so we can figure that out. But that's what I have to do. I think that there is more that the city needs to do, which I think maybe Chris can speak a little bit more to, but yeah.
I'm happy to, and please, all, if I'm missing things, which I may be happy, just let me know. So I think there have been 3 different sets of conversations, maybe taking them sequentially, a set of conversations that were around the timeline project, a set of conversations around governance, a set of conversations essentially around capacity, funding, et cetera. On the first, my sense, what I heard was there's sort of these 3 different questions that we need to answer. Again, sequentially, there's a question of, is the timeline project something the city can host simply technically? I think that is the Do It conversation. Second, there is a question that I think this group raised, which is, if we can host it, or even if we can't, is it something that we should host or should endorse? And then I think there's a third question, if the answer to that second one is yes, which is, if so, how do we then roll that out? So I think there's sort of 3 questions that are associated with the timeline project, which I think was sort of one of the first things we talked about. Then I think there's a set of governance questions, which I think my sense is there is a strong interest in further conversation around sort of the structure of the Commemoration Commission, but potentially an interest in understanding what are the options for amending the structure of this body or its subcommittees. And I think, and my sense is, we are in no place around sort of consensus of whether that is something we should do, but some work which we can do of just being able to lay out what the process and what the options could be. And then there's a third set of work, which is really around resources, which I think there's some tactical stuff that we can do, looking at things like the Community Preservation Act question that Joe raised, and I think laying out a little bit of a process of how we think about access to funds over the course of FY25, whether those are city funds or non-city funds, and then how we prep ourselves for the FY26 budget building process, which again really starts in earnest this fall. Those were sort of the 3 broad categories of things. I do think there is work that's sort of building on David's comments towards the end that are really sort of build off the work, all the work which Hennessy has done, and the fact that with Amanda and with Jean-Luc, we have new co-chairs to think about how we make sure that we are moving forward on just the process and management of this commission overall. But those were some of my takeaways. I'm sure that I'm missing things. Margaret, I'm sure I missed something already off the top, so please feel free to add what I want to try.
Muted, Margaret.
Thanks, Joe. You're always looking out for me. those are very helpful overviews. I think we also have a very fundamental budget question to have. We have our internal budget to support the work of the commission. We also have a program budget to deliver on the ideals and the goals of the commission, and whether that's funding from the public sector, municipal, state, federal, the private sector, for-profit, nonprofit. So we really have three budgets that we're looking at. Our own budget for our own operations, our public sector budget, and our philanthropic budget. And that's sort of two parts, because I think I'm hearing that we can't really come up with a program till we have a budget, and we can't really have a budget until we, have a sense of what we want to do for our program. So Hennessy, if it's all right with you, I think I'd like to reach out to you and maybe share some documents that we have from the olden days when they did this the last time, and the sort of things that they were thinking about, and then maybe share with the committee that as where we could plug the holes, where those were lacking, where they weren't thinking broadly enough. But I think that until we have money to distribute or money to deliver with, that we need to know that before we can do almost anything else. So I'd like to help with that, if that's all right.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, everybody's leaving, so if Amanda, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I make a motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, thank you guys.
Adjourned.
Thank you, Hennessy.
Thank you.